The warmth of the fire was like a gentle embrace, wrapping around me as I sat next to Richard, my husband of 40 years. His eyes, reflecting the dancing flames, held stories of our shared past, a lifetime of love and quiet evenings just like this one. But as the clock chimed, signaling the arrival of Daniel, Richard's son, a shiver of anticipation ran through me. Daniel and I, our relationship always polite yet distant, were about to share a moment that would change everything. The firelight flickered, casting shadows that seemed to whisper secrets as I felt the weight of an unspoken desire. What happened? Next was not just a simple greeting, but the beginning of a storm that would engulf our family in its fiery embrace. The scent of pine from the burning logs mingled with the faint aroma of our dinner, creating a comforting cocoon around us. I sat in my cozy living room, the warmth of the fireplace casting a soft glow over my face. Richard, my husband of 40 years, sat beside me, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames as we talked about the day's events. His robust frame, now softened by age, seemed to melt into the plush cushions of the sofa as the clock chimed 8. Richard's eyelids began to droop, his head lolling back, a sign of the sleep that was about to claim him. I watched him, a gentle smile playing on my lips, knowing how much he cherished these quiet moments after a meal. The room was filled with the kind of silence that speaks volumes, the kind where you can hear the heartbeat of your home. But as the fire crackled, an unexpected visitor would soon change the evening's tranquility. Daniel, Richard's son from a previous marriage, was expected to visit later that evening. Now, in his early 40s, Daniel had always been a part of our lives, though his relationship with me had been somewhat distant, marked by polite but reserved interactions. I often wondered about the unspoken words between us, the stories left untold, the warmth that seemed just out of reach. The fire's glow flickered across Richard's face, casting shadows that danced like memories. I could almost see the younger version of him, vibrant and full of life, the man I fell in love with. But time, like the fire, had its way of transforming everything. I glanced at the clock again, its hands creeping closer to the hour when Daniel would arrive. The anticipation of his visit stirred a mix of emotions within me. I reached for a book on the side table, a novel I had been meaning to read for weeks. The room was silent except for the occasional pop from the fire and Richard's soft snoring. I opened the book, my eyes scanning the first lines, when I felt a presence behind me. Turning slightly, I saw Daniel standing there, his silhouette framed by the dim light from the hallway. He had arrived quietly, not wanting to disturb his father. With a warm smile, he approached me, his arms outstretched for a hug. I stood up, the book slipping from my grasp onto the sofa, and met him halfway. His embrace was firm, yet there was an underlying tension, a current of something unspoken. As we parted, I noticed his eyes, usually so guarded, seemed to hold a storm of emotions. "Daniel, it's good to see you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was racing. He nodded, his gaze drifting to his father. "He looks peaceful," Daniel remarked, his voice low. "Yes, he does," I replied, watching Richard's chest rise and fall with each breath. There was a pause, heavy with the weight of things left unsaid. Daniel turned back to me, his expression shifting, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made me catch my breath. "I need to talk to you, Margaret," he said, his tone suggesting this was no ordinary visit. The warmth of the room seemed to cool slightly, the fire's glow dimming as if sensing the shift in atmosphere. What seemed like a simple greeting was about to take an unexpected turn. Daniel wrapped his arms around me in a hug that lingered longer than usual. Surprised but not uncomfortable, I turned to face him, my heart beating a little faster. In that moment, something shifted. Perhaps it was the intimacy of the setting or the vulnerability of the night, but when Daniel leaned in to kiss me, I responded. The kiss was gentle at first, but it deepened, carrying with it an unspoken desire. His hands moved with a familiarity that was both shocking and thrilling to me as our embrace intensified. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, guilt, excitement, confusion. I knew this was wrong, yet I couldn't pull away. The firelight flickered over our faces, casting shadows that seemed to dance with our forbidden act. Daniel's touch was both familiar and foreign, igniting a fire within me that I hadn't felt in years. His lips moved from mine to my neck, each kiss sending a shiver down my spine. The room seemed to close in around us, the warmth of the fire now a mere backdrop to the heat we were generating. I felt his breath against my ear, his whisper sending a rush through me. "Margaret, I've wanted this for so long." His words were like a key unlocking a door I hadn't realized was locked. My hands, trembling slightly, found their way to his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart matching mine. The room was silent except for our breathing, the occasional crackle of the fire, and the soft snoring of Richard, oblivious to the storm brewing just feet away from him. The guilt was there, a heavy stone in my stomach, but it was being drowned out by the rush of adrenaline, the thrill of the forbidden. But as we lost ourselves in the moment, we were unaware that we were not alone. I stirred from my slumber, the silence in the room suddenly feeling too heavy, too thick. My eyes fluttered open, and for a moment I lay there trying to make sense of the muffled sounds that seemed to echo from a distance. I turned my head, and through half-closed eyes I saw the silhouette of my wife, Margaret, and my son, Daniel. In an embrace that was far from innocent, my heart sank, my mind racing to understand what my eyes were telling me. Margaret, sensing a shift in the room's atmosphere, pulled back from Daniel, her breath catching in her throat as she met my gaze. Daniel, realizing the gravity of the situation, stepped back, his face a mask of shock and regret. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, the air thick with the unspoken question, what would happen next? My mind was a storm of confusion, betrayal, and a deep, aching hurt. Here, in the room where we had shared so many quiet moments, where the warmth of the fire had always been a symbol of our comfort and unity, I was now witnessing a scene that shattered the very foundation of our family. Margaret's eyes were wide, filled with a mix of fear and something else I couldn't quite place. Was it guilt? Or perhaps a plea for understanding? Daniel, on the other hand, looked like a man caught in the headlights, his usual composure replaced by a vulnerability I had rarely seen. I sat up, the plush cushions of the sofa feeling like quicksand beneath me, pulling me into a reality I didn't want to face. My voice, when I finally found it, was a mere whisper. What is this? I could barely believe the scene unfolding before me. Margaret's lips parted, but no words came out. Daniel took a hesitant step forward, his hands outstretched as if to explain, but the words seemed to fail him too. The fire crackled, a stark contrast to the cold that was seeping into my bones. The room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage, where a tragic play was unfolding. My heart was pounding, each beat a drum of betrayal echoing through the silence. I stood up, my legs shaky. I stood up, my legs shaky, my resolve hardening like the cold embers of the fire. The room seemed to shrink around us, the warmth now feeling oppressive, as if the very walls were closing in on this betrayal. Richard, now fully awake, sat up, his expression unreadable. The fire's glow cast long shadows over his face, making his eyes look like dark pits of confusion and hurt. Margaret's eyes were wide with fear and remorse, while Daniel looked like a man caught in a storm he didn't see coming. What is this? Richard's voice, when it came, was calm, but carried an edge of steel slicing through the thick tension in the room. Margaret tried to speak, but words failed her. Her lips moved, but only a choked sob escaped, her eyes darting between Richard and Daniel, searching for some semblance of understanding or forgiveness. Daniel, in a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, began to explain, Dad, it just happened. It wasn't planned, I swear. His words were hollow, filled with excuses that even he didn't believe. The betrayal was palpable, hanging between them like a thick fog, obscuring the once clear lines of family loyalty and love. Richard's gaze shifted from Daniel to Margaret, his face a mask of pain. How long? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of a lifetime of trust, now shattered. Margaret's hands trembled as she reached out towards Richard, but he recoiled, the physical distance between them now a metaphor for the emotional chasm that had opened. It was just tonight, she managed to say, her voice breaking under the weight of her confession. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with the echoes of a family unraveling. The fire, once a source of comfort, now seemed to mock them, with its relentless crackling, a reminder of the warmth they had lost. Richard's eyes, still reflecting the dancing flames, seemed to search for something in the depths of the fire, perhaps for the remnants of the life he thought he knew. His voice, when he spoke again, was steady, but carried the tremor of a man whose world the night stretched on with heavy hearts and whispered apologies. After a long silence, Richard simply said, "We will try to forget this." His words were not of forgiveness, but of a desire to move past the incident, to preserve what remained of our family. I felt a cold chill despite the fire's heat, the weight of my actions now a heavy burden I would carry. Daniel left his departure marked by the soft click of the door, leaving behind a void filled with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. In the days that followed, life resumed, but with a palpable tension. Conversations were stilted, and the warmth of our home seemed diminished. Richard and I, bound by years of companionship, tried to rebuild, but the foundation of trust had been shaken. We would never speak of that night again, yet it would always linger in the shadows of our minds. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The silence between us was not just the absence of words, but the presence of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. Each morning, I would wake up to find Richard already up, his back turned to me as he stared out the window. His silhouette a stark reminder of the distance that had grown between us. I tried to fill the void with small acts of kindness, like making his favorite breakfast or leaving notes of love and regret, but they seemed to float in the air, never quite reaching him. Our interactions were polite, almost formal, as if we were strangers, sharing a space rather than partners sharing a life. At times, I caught Richard looking at me with a mix of sadness and confusion, as if trying to reconcile the woman he loved with the one who had betrayed him. His eyes, once full of warmth and laughter, now held a guardedness that pained me to see. Daniel's absence was a constant reminder of the fracture in our family. His visits ceased and his calls became less frequent. The once vibrant connection we had, strained as it was, now felt like a distant memory. I missed his laughter, his stories, the way he would tease Richard, but I knew our actions had consequences that echoed far beyond that one night. The house, once filled with the sounds of family, now echoed with silence and the memories of what once was. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.